This is Phil Stamper, the president of wrestling, and you're watching the 3 Count Podcast. And always remember to trust in Phil.
Well, now you guys have been with us for a while. You guys know what this means. We have a part 2, or as I would like to think of in the college courses, 201. This is now Ancient Ring 201, and I am your host, Clifford Red Dog. Well, that's right, the man that leads you up this mountain called wrestling. And just like in now entering the ring, you can see that it's never about me, but it's about who's entering. And this man can be found literally everywhere. Everywhere. You can find this man at HWF, SCWA, IWTV, everywhere on IWTV. He is a booker. He is a ring announcer. He is a play-by-play. He is a worker. He is the man who has defeated Killian McMurphy numerous times. I don't care what anybody says. He has done it numerous times. So he is here. He is the president of wrestling himself, Phil Stamper.
Well, hi, everybody.
I'm so hyped having you back, man.
Well, thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm we were talking about HWF, man, and it was just interesting to think back that like it's been 2 years now that I've started, and like listening to you, right, and talking with you about just like being mobile and just loose and just like learning the ropes and stuff like that. It's been incredible to kind of like be able to pick your brain and kind of like see things from your perspective. And one, I just wanted to say thank you first for just like taking me under your wing and teaching me the ropes.
I mean, absolutely.
So
It always boggles me when I've seen people do the opposite, like, oh, there's somebody new. I don't need to. Why am I gonna mess with them? And it's like, because who knows how you're gonna interact with them in the future? Like, they're who you're gonna leave behind. They're the next person. Like, why not?
yeah, it's funny too, man, because I know like and I didn't know this at the time that we did our first interview, so I found this out later that you had a pretty significant neck injury, but I still roll with you in the ring, and I don't care what anybody gotta say, man. You are still very fluid in the ring.
Wait a minute, who's saying something else?
I'm just,
Yeah.
I was
I'm
like,
just saying.
I don't know what, I was like, I don't know what to expect. I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen, and next thing you know, it's like, takedowns are happening, and I'm just like, oh, okay, so I gotta turn this up a notch. It's like obviously I can't just stay here and just just play around. But it's like the beauty of wrestling, man, is that something that you have like so much knowledge in the game. You know a lot of people, and then you made all these cool connections and stuff, and then getting to pick your brain and find out more stuff like with wrestlers like me, right? Like I had mentioned, right? So like when you have that wrestler come through, like, and he tells you like, hey, like I've been in the business now for like 2 years, like what do you look for? Like what's those things that you're like trying to pick out to establish whether they're like green or just like, semi green?
Certainly there's sort of an element of presence. How are they coming off, whether that's in the ring, in the locker room, as you talk with them. And I'm that person, like, I'll talk to anybody. Like, I'm not that hesitant or like, who is this person? Like, oh, hey, how are you? And just engage in a conversation. And just sometimes just from reading the person, it's like, okay, I think I see where you're at. Like, even just in the basic conversation, even before I get to see their work, sometimes my brain's already like, oh, I know how this is going to work. And then that'd be great. Other times it's like, let me see. And other times I'm like, okay, I got it. He's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Now let's see if the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Is the evidence there as you see them compete inside of a ring? And I still think when somebody's 2 years in that they're still young, they're still learning, depending on where they've come from. And I said this to you the other day, like depending on where they've come from is one aspect of it and where they've been so far. But if you think about 2 years right now, we've been dealing with a pandemic for 2 years. So opportunities have been very different than what they used to be like. And, there's been a lot more studio events, and there's been a lot more pre-taped stuff, and the way crowds interact is slightly different. So it's like, okay, so this has been a very different 2 years. So it really is trying to come to find out like where this person might be at. I would hope that that they have gone well above the sort of basic level that they're at that next step or ready for that next step. Because sometimes when people find that they start off in their first 2 years, they haven't really necessarily left where they started, and sometimes they need to branch out more. I'm not saying leave the place they started, but just branch out more, start working with other people, different areas, take additional seminars with people that you've never interacted with or worked with before to keep learning. And that's something I learned as I went, was you don't stop learning just because training is done. That you always are going back and training, you're always trying new stuff, that you're always working on things. And even as like I would work out with you or other people, it's like, oh, let me think about this and see if this works, and how would I describe this to somebody, because now it's a different mindset to get into when you teach somebody else too.
Yeah, it's definitely eye-opening, because I know like it's getting to a point now where like even my trainer is like, hey man, like run these kids through their rolls and their bumps and then like teach them how to lock up. And I'm like, what? He's like, I trust you. You'll teach them right. He's like, you're good. And it's weird to see like that responsibility get kind of put on me. But then like what also makes it kind of unique too is that like I get to teach it and I get to relearn it and remaster, I guess is would be the way, not even remaster, but just re-educate myself in like how it works. And it's cool in that aspect. What makes it crazy too is just that I get people like you, they come over, we hang out and we do a roll session, and I get to pick your brain about it. And I don't know, it's and I hear what you're saying too about like the pandemic obviously like changing the way people are. So you kind of hope that when someone says, "Yeah, I've been in business for like 3 years now," like they have that pedigree to say they've been in 3 years, because like you probably wrestled 3 times maybe in 3 years, and
Right.
like so I definitely understand that aspect of like, hey, like you've only been in for this long, but you really haven't been. And I think I pride myself on that too, where like I've gone through and like I never really stopped. I think I stopped for probably maybe a total of like 10 weeks. And that's because 8 of those weeks was obviously just the pandemic, right? And then I can't even say that when I got injured and practice that I stopped training, because like I still showed up
Yeah.
every week just to take mental notes. And I don't know, man. It's weird because I feel like, and I kind of hope that my craftsmanship still shows that I'm green, but still shows that like I'm not like day one kind of green.
What does floor me is there are some guys, and I will say when I say this next part, you were not one of them, is like who get MJF syndrome. Like they see MJF and the success that was able to capitalize on very, very quickly, very early in a wrestling career, forgetting the fact that like, look at him, he stays active in the gym. He went from Brian Myers and at Create a Pro to I don't know if I should mention the other place he went. Other places in Jersey, then got training with like Jake Christ and Sammy Callahan and even Cody Rhodes. And like he kept working and working and working and getting other people, and continued like working on his physique and his in-ring ability, and kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And people forget that part. And they're like, well, I've been in it 2 years. I'm ready. I'm ready. Like I should be signed now. And it's like, take a breath. Like you still have work to do. And in the meantime, do that work so you get the attention on you.
Yeah, it is funny because like I know like MJF is definitely a prime example. Who else was another? Chris Statlander is another one that very short time just exploded on scene. But people really don't see that. Like there's a lot of work to put in, and if you're not willing to put in that work, don't act like you deserve the rewards because you're like, what's he got that I don't got? Work ethic. That's what he's got.
Right.
I find myself
a ring presence, a personality sometimes.
Yeah, the ability to cut a decent promo on the fly and not even think twice. Like, yeah, he's got a lot of stuff going on for him. It's funny though because like I noted that with a lot of people I've talked to that are like, yeah, I've been doing this for almost 2.5 years. I'm like, oh wow, like I don't like the way you said that at all.
Right. And there are certain people that, and just by who they uniquely are, that are like, when they say things like that, or they say things like, when they try to act like they're the veteran in the room and they've been here a minute, like not even a minute. And
Right.
it's like, yes, you might have something to add to the conversation, but give the respect. I mean, and this is not saying, this is like going into your job, your workplace, and like, here is maybe shift leads and managers and supervisors, and you're like trying to talk above them and talk down to them as they're trying to instruct something. Like, how is that appropriate? So I've seen that a lot, and I've seen where that's cost people opportunities because sometimes they don't know when to shut off that valve. At 2 years in two can be that break or make period, because that's also when, again, you've probably established a good base, and now you're at that point of like, you're really trying to get your name out there. And so how are you relating yourself to other promoters and introducing yourself and getting yourself known? And you're starting to push that envelope a lot more because now you have the ability, or should have at least that basic level of ability, to back it up.
Yeah, so I'm curious, like in that aspect, right? Like, what would you like? Where would you do, or what would you do, like in your second year, right, that you were in? Like, what were you doing to like help getting yourself like established out there with like promoters and stuff like that?
Let's see, where now I got to think where I was. So I at that point I was living in northeastern Pennsylvania. I'd been trained in Maryland, and for context too, the person who trained me was done. Like, he had left wrestling, his promotion had closed, his school wasn't open, and it was like, so I didn't have like that base anymore. And so by that point I had found sort of another association of people to be with. I started to get clinics at that point with a friend of mine that got work with OVW. Um, and had started that period of networking. I was starting to meet other promoters and network. And that was really important, that networking piece of just how do you talk to other people. And no one really taught me. And then sort of in many ways I had to learn from other people and sort of see myself, but no one ever really taught me in my beginning, how do you talk to a promoter? How do you say things to be like, hi, please book me? And so I sort of had to work with some people on that. And I mean, I even got told no by promoters, and I was like, what can I do better to the next person? And some people were very honest, and some people left me on red, and it was what it was. And I mean, we're talking about the day I started, when like I was still sending like physical materials to people through the mail. Like, it wasn't too much longer after that everything was digital, but at the same time, like, I was doing it that way. And it was very word of mouthy. Like, how do people know you? What is your associations? And sometimes it was that good old boy network. Oh, well, I know this person, and this person has a friend who's a promoter, and it was a lot of that. But even in the digital world, it still is a lot of that, and it's just leveraging it differently. And it was much later before anybody taught me just how do I tell, like, if I have an event nearby, like I'm fortunate with MCW that we have a venue that's 25 minutes from my house. And I'm like, how do I talk to my neighbors about the fact I'm in wrestling? How do I get them to come? And no one ever told me that. I sort of had to learn it as I went.
Yeah, it's crazy because like I feel like that's where I'm at right now. It's like, all right, so how do I utilize like the platform that I've built up, and how do I reach out to those people that I've talked to?
Mhm.
And I know I've talked to like a ton of different wrestlers, and anybody who, full transparency, might be episode 2 of 201, but we have 204 episodes. 4 of them haven't come out yet. They're still in the can. But yeah, it's crazy to think that like and trying to utilize the network and pull and push and grind and find out like who's connected to what. Because like the other problem though is that you find out is, and this was something that I didn't know this was like a real thing. But if you work at one promotion, you probably won't work at another one.
Yeah. You I mean, you would hope, right?
Right.
And there's also a trap that people can fall into too, because it's like we sort of have hinted to this. It's like believing your own hype, like having some grace in your brain to be like, this is how I talk myself up. At the same time, this is where I need to stay humble and quiet for a minute and listen. And for some people, that's really hard, because especially if they're starting to really put themselves out there, they have to convince somebody else that I'm good enough to be put on an event. And I'm only been here 2 years, and I'm competing against people who've been in 20. How how do I say, hey, you should book me instead of this next person? And sometimes some people believe that own hype, that as much as they're talking themselves up to this other person, they start to believe it themselves. And so that's like a trap that some people can fall into. And so they have to be cautious about that road and knowing like, okay, I need to kind of stay here. Like I can show everybody, hey, look at the nice flashy car, but really like I'm pushing it down the highway and they don't all see that part. Like to stay humble about it at least a little bit.
Yeah, and that's where like I know like I've gone through and I made my resume and I just refuse to look at it, right? And then like every once in a while I'll go back and edit it, but I just won't read like everything else in the context. 'Cause I'm like, I know who I am, like I know like what I can bring to a table. But the other part is I had to stop doing it. I had to stop like reading it because I would degrade myself so much that I actually went the opposite way and started like turtling up. I was like, no one's gonna book me because I'm stupid. Like you're not gonna read this. They're just gonna leave me on red. And I had to like I had to actually talk. I had to talk with Sicken, and Sicken was like, "What is wrong with you?" it's like he's like, "I'm not gonna tell you that you're the most amazing wrestler out there, but he's like, you're not as bad as what you think you are." He's like, "You're always." The one thing he always tells me too, he's like, you always get hung up on like one or two things that happen in every one of your matches. He's like, but then like the whole match will be good, but then you're just focused about this. Oh, I didn't do this right, and then you beat yourself up. He's like, you gotta stop. He's like, you gotta stop. You gotta just know you put on a solid effort out there. I was like, I don't want solid efforts. I want great ones.
And you know, you will always be your most harsh critic, and you should be, because that'll help you get better because you'll be reflective enough to learn. Um, I'm trying to be cautious about something that's popped in my brain is, you know, I know people who are out there who were in that same realm, like let's say in that 2 to 4 year span, who are getting some opportunities to be looked at, that are getting some of those tryouts, or you know, getting on AAW Dark, or being a developmental person, or a enhancement talent, as they say, and then they come back and they like bloated sense of self-importance and ego, and like then they have a match and it's not as good as they were expecting it to be, but they don't look at themselves to go like, okay, how could I have made that better? What could I have done different? They're like, it was just the worst, and that person dot dot dot, and that person dot dot, you know, they start turning away from themselves because they want to be like, I'm the best, and it's like, think about this for a moment. And why didn't this work? Like,
Yeah, yeah. At least you know it's funny because I can always go back and like watch my videos, and I won't nitpick. I'll just look for like the glaring obvious things, and I'm just like, all right, now I can put that to the side because I know like there was a practice match I had, you know, and it was agented. It was agented. Is that the word? I don't know. There was an agent for it,
yeah.
and he put the match together, and it got super complicated. And I remember got frustrated, and it's something. And people who are watching this, like, always remember this. This is something that it's never if you're gonna mess up, just when you're gonna mess up, and you're going to mess up. And I had to think about that because it was something else that Sicken had told me where he's like, it's not if you get injured, it's just when you're gonna get injured because you're gonna get injured. He's like, so in the aspect of wrestling, he's like, it's not if you mess up, it's when you mess up. And I feel like once he said that, like everything clicked over, and I was like, oh, okay, well I care, but I don't. If I mess up, I'm not gonna harp on it. It's gonna happen, and it took that word of advice for me to be like, all right, let's get into this. And so now, like when I go and talk to promoters and stuff like that, like I recently reached out to a promoter and I was like, hey, I used to be booked on your show, and then suddenly I just stopped getting booked. Was there something I did? Is there something I could do to be better? Like, what kind of feedback do you have for me? And they were just like, no, we changed bookers. I was like, okay. Didn't see that one coming.
That happens, and you know, at this point too, the person who's 2 years in is starting to also see some of the realities of wrestling that they might not have expected or saw before, and or have, because now they've started to really experience it. They've worked out with multiple people. Like they know the road is not always paved with gold. They know that it's like not always, you know, not every promotion is this amazing spectacle with A+ caliber talent up and down the card, and that not everybody has your best interest in mind. You know, that some people are looking out for themselves more than making sure you're also in a good place in the ring too. So like, you've started to learn some of those lessons. And it's like, in my life, outside of wrestling, I work at a school. I work in higher education, and so I see those young adults, 18, 19 years old, like figuring things out, like, oh, like this is real, like this is what life is, and like, yeah, and they're starting to see those pieces, and in many cases, and you know, I know that, well, maybe I shouldn't say. I know in some cases for people in wrestling, they're in that same age group. They're at 18 or 19 or 20, you know, and just starting out, and they're just a couple years in, and it's like they're just still learning the world, not just wrestling. They're learning like everything. They're learning how to be an adult, and so I know sometimes people forget that, and it's like, yeah, I want to say it was well, Trent, of Best Friends, Zack Ryder, and there was somebody else who I'm forgetting. Like, basically started in the WWE when they were like 19. Like, their first moment with the WWE was 19 years old. And I think Trent, especially in one interview, was like, I had to I don't know what I was doing. I was a 19-year-old kid, and I look back now and go like, what? Like, and it's just like sometimes you have to go through it and experience it to then go back and understand it later. And that's hard. That really is hard. Like, learning without knowing that you're intentionally learning is also difficult. So
Yeah, it's like it's sometimes I feel like I because I'm at that point now where I'm just watching and I'm like, all right, obviously don't do that, don't do this, and then you run into a wall and you're like, all right, I got to go left, not around or not through,
right.
and it's difficult. But then the other part of it is that like there's this fear factor of like trying to reach out to like your first promoter on your own, or you're trying to figure out like what the road is supposed to be paved, right? Because you could come up with all the plans in the world and you could tell your friends like, yeah, I'm gonna wrestle in like the plan for me this year at some point, right, is going to be at least wrestle in 7 different states that I haven't worked in before, right? That's the goal. And by October, I said it out loud, to be on AEW Dark at least once, right? Those are lofty goals, but those are
Yeah.
goals that I still feel like are obtainable. But it's that nerve-wracking part of knowing that you're gonna hit that rejection. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to commit to this just yet.
It's gonna happen. Like, it's gonna happen. I mean, it's funny because, like, you know, having now had a lot of people I've known go through that experience, or different experiences, different places. Like, and when I say this I'm gonna say this person's name. Like, he makes fun of this. Like, I remember when Bobby Shields had like he was on WWE television and he like trips over the ropes, like getting into the ring, and it was just like half nervousness, half positioning. It's a very different ring style because WWE has ropes, and especially on the indies, many of us are used to like metal ropes with some kind of coating on it. So it was just a different experience, and he like just momentarily tripped up, and like he got ragged on for like 6 months because of that. And it's like, okay, he learned, like, it's a thing that happened. And so like they're not all going to be, you're not going to hit every ball out of the park, but at least try to make contact.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like that's something like I should be doing is just at least reaching out. Because you know what, at the end of the day, if like somebody knows my name or they've heard me, you know, and then they're probably gonna go look for something and then see how I am, and you know, or maybe one person's gonna know who I am. And I feel like this podcast has kind of like opened up a lot for me, you know, because as far as like I've reached out all the way through, I don't know, out to California and up to Maine and down to Florida and into Texas, right? So, you know, if you randomly walk and talk to someone in St. Louis in the area, like
Right.
I have like these little connections, and I feel like I networked well, but I'm just worried because I'm gonna be like, hey man, yeah, I'm Cliff, and I just want to be booked on your show. Here's my footage. Tell me what you think. I don't know. It's weird. I feel like okay. This is probably the best example of it. I feel like a kid trying to go ask a girl to be his girlfriend for the first time. Like those kind of nerves. Because
Mhm,
like
mhm.
when you get the first one and they're like, no, I bet I'm gonna shoot for that one.
Well, and and I find this in my professional life, both in and out of wrestling, is sometimes it is who you know, like, and so having some good associations and good people like you can help leverage you to get some of those other opportunities too, can also be helpful because they'll help settle a little bit of that nerve sometimes of like, how do I talk to this person? Say, hey, guy, give me a job, please pay me. Um, and sometimes, and I've had to tell this story to some other people lately when I've done some workshops and seminars, is like, you never know about the connections you build, or the bridges that you burn sometimes until years later, and how that could come back to benefit you, but then also by association the other people who associate with you, and that could be anything from I want to be cautious about how I say this. I had somebody about a year ago ask me about recommendations for an opportunity on television. I won't say what company. And it was like, I didn't expect that, but he's like, and I think I even said to him, like, oh, I didn't think you would, I'm surprised you asked me. And he was just like, well, I know you and you're trustworthy. And I know you see talent. I know you see a lot of independence, and I know you know people who are out there. So that's why I'm asking you. And I'm like, oh yeah, makes sense. But if I had ever like turned and just been a solid jerk to him, and there was an opportunity where maybe I could have been, like, why would he ever want to associate with me? And so like that's part of it too, is you just never know that connection you make and what it means. And I think I might have told you personally this once, but like Killer Cross, when I had the opportunity to work with Killer Cross at Wrestling Revolver, or Karrion Kross for those who might have known him in NXT and WWE, like I just thought like, oh, cool guy, like I'm gonna get to work with him, like, oh, that's really cool, that's awesome, like I like his stuff. And then like actually started to talk with them, and like, oh wow, he's a solid dude. And there was something that happened to a family member of mine, and he reached out, and like I didn't expect that, like I didn't think we had like that kind of relationship, and he was like, man, this is what it means, you're gonna be good, like this is what happens, like I have your back. And I was like, that meant the world to me, because there was no reason he had to do that. He could just like liked my post and like gone away. And no, like, and I'm like, so like I honor that relationship, and I really do appreciate that. And again, you just never know what's going to turn around at the end of the day based on the connections you make.
Yeah, you're right. And it's funny though, because like the connection, like I'm gonna be honest, man, our relationship, our friendship, whatever you want,
Mhm.
partner, I don't care what you call it. Our ships. Uh, I genuinely value them every time I see you. Yo, yes. I
I'm like,
know.
how would you combine? No, I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to
But
Philip. No,
Philip, Philip, nah, I don't like that.
no,
Phil? No,
no.
that's just one name.
We're good. We're good. We're good.
But I genuinely like I come to you like so often, and I know like I genuinely use you as like a mentor and stuff like that. I feel like I'm always in your DMs, just picking your brain and asking you questions. And like sometimes it's cool. Sometimes you get invited to go play Among Us with some people that you never expected to be playing with.
Right.
And like the kid in me is just like jumping out of his skin, and no one can no one can tell because I refuse to turn my mic on because I don't want to defend myself. I'll just get voted off.
I will say on that game, because there were some people on there. There was somebody else who I was like, oh, like this is going to be a good fit. And I'm not going to lie, like there was kind of a like this could be a networking opportunity for certain people to maybe meet each other. And this one person, intentionally in my brain, I'm like, he is really going to benefit if he meets this other person. And fast forward a month later, and they did connect. And he said the same exact thing to me. He's like, I didn't have my mic on because I was a little like, oh God, what if I say the wrong thing with these people in here? And like,
Yeah, yeah, I was like, you know what, defend? Nah, man, I'm just gonna just go around and murk people in Among Us. Not worry about it. But yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like these opportunities and connections, like you just never know where they're gonna lead up to. But in the same token, like I'm always afraid of like going back out and like reaching to that person too. Like, hey, like, do you remember me? Like we played Among Us. Like, But it's cool though, because like I said, using you and like talking to you and like gaining all this like random knowledge and just like writing it down everywhere in my notebooks, like it's really benefited me and it's really helped me like grow as an individual in the sport. I just know, like, for myself, like, I got to build up the confidence in me, and that's not something that anybody else can do, but to throw myself out there and be like, hey man, like, book me.
Yeah. And that'll come. That'll totally come.
Right. So aside from just like reaching out to promoters and stuff like that, and maybe like a way like the attitude that they're carrying themselves with, or maybe lack of attitude they're carrying themselves with, like what are some of the other things that you look for like in that person that's like in their second year?
Um well well, kind of in the development of wrestling too, like where is their skill level, and not just like in ring, how are they showcasing their personality, you know, if they are ready for that next step, like do they have gear that would make somebody want to hire them, like where are they, and even how are they talking about themselves, kind of in that same way of what you just said. And like I take that all in, and especially when I know with certain people that they're going to turn around and then ask me for my opinion, that I want that and this has been hard for me too, because it's a sort of a different thing for me, is to be able to give critical feedback. Because there was that time, like especially when people would first start asking me my opinions, and it was like I wanted to be the nice guy, and sometimes I wasn't critical, and so like then my feedback meant nothing because it gave nothing. And so now I've realized like I can't be the total 180 on that spectrum, because then people will disregard it because they're like, oh, that's too critical, like you're being too harsh, you're being a jerk for the sake of being a jerk. And I'm like, no. And so like now I have to like sort of disclaim it a little bit and just be like, well, I want to give you feedback, but only if you're ready for it. And you know, if I write something down, if I write notes down, like it is literally like train of thought I'm writing down as I go. Please don't take offense to it. It's not meant as that. It's just this was what was populating in my brain as I went. And I remember somebody very recently did that. It was somebody I didn't expect, and I was like, okay. And they were like, Philip, no one actually will give me honest feedback, and I don't know what then I should do. And I gave them feedback, and this person was like, oh my gosh, like no wonder I wasn't getting what I thought I was getting out of this, and no wonder this thing didn't happen, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get in the right position for this. Nobody has said this to me. And this person really felt like people just weren't being honest with them based on where they had been and who they were, or by their associations. And so like it is a challenge then for some people who have been around a minute to also then be able to give that feedback, but it's also then based on what that person brings. So it should be interactive. Like there have been people who I've directly said, like, you know what, you have almost everything there, you honestly need different gear.
No.
I wasn't saying that.
You were.
But like the gear you have right now fits, like it comes together, like it fits who you are too. Because there are some people who like, I started to do this one thing at a workshop one time, because I was like, these were like maybe kids like 6 months to a year in, mostly. And I'm like, I have this weird feeling that they don't know where they're at. And so I was like, I don't want you to tell me anything about your gimmick. I want you to like come out, do your entrance, do your match. And when I give you feedback, I'm going to tell you what I think your gimmick is. I'm going to tell you if I thought you were face or heel. That's going to be part of the critique. And so like I wrote out, like, I can't remember the first person I did, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally got you're this, you're that, you're like the bully older brother, you're this. And he's like, no, like that I'm supposed to be this other thing. And it's like, oh, well, this is what told part of that story, not just your behavior, your attitude, the physical way you dressed came off in this particular way. And he was like, no, like I was supposed to be this other thing. I was supposed to be face. And I'm like, I'm not meaning it to be mean, but if you don't hear it and take that moment of reflection to just go like, where am I really? You're not going to learn from it.
Yeah, I think that was something too I ended up learning, and that's why I'm still trying to like learn and adapt like how even my character is portrayed, right? Because I was working for a promoter, right? And he wanted to see how I worked, but I was in just regular clothes. I was in it was a practice match, and he was like, "I want you to act like this is a show, even though we know you're not in your gear. Like act
Yeah.
like this is a show." So I did. And I add my character, and I add my own little spin. I add my spin to everything I do. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I totally got it. He was a heel." And my trainer was like, "Did he do anything that was heelish?" And he was like, "Well, no, but he just talked a lot." He was like, "Yeah, but he didn't do anything that was a heel.
Right.
Clearly, he's a face." And I was like, to me at that point, I realized that one, and no disrespect to my trainer, second, no disrespect, but you're close to the project, so you know what to look for.
Hmm.
However, this promoter
Right.
who has an outside view was like, no, 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 no. He is a heel because of this. Maybe it works in the sense that it's more like a comedy kind of deal,
Hmm.
and he's a comedy face, but it looks kind of a heel. And even things that I say, or even things that are said for me, right? Like at HWF, his height is 5'9" or 6'2", depending on what convenience store he's running out of. His weight for it, and he hails from the island of misfit toys. Like, that's, yeah, I could see why that would definitely come off as heelish. But
Mhm.
then once people see me in the ring and see how I interact, they clearly can see like I'm more of a face. But yeah, it took that kind of moment, and I was like, all right, well, what can I do to like still have this spin of a character, but let people know that I'm this way? So like,
Mhm.
I think the tactical gear, obviously, because I was military, and then the fact that I just talk a lot of trash, and people can resemble it to Deadpool, like I think that like helps a lot.
Mhm. I mean, so there is that thing about being a couple years in, about I'm thinking back at my time of being only a couple years in, and like that gold paved road, like I see the road, like I'm gonna go down it's things are gonna be great. There's gonna be like a golden sunset, and praise shall come upon me, and also had this weird mindset of like, it's sort of like when you go into an office job and you're like, the boss is the person who's right all the time, because they have to be the one who's right, because you're the one who works for them. Like a promoter is your boss. Like everything they say is gold, and like that has to be the way it is, and like move forward, and look at the golden flowering sunset of praise. And then you realize like sometimes the promoter doesn't know what they're talking about either. And like in a nice respectful way, how do you work with that, and get to a point where you can work with that. And I mean, that's personality sometimes, and that's hard to deal with. I still have those moments sometimes now, where it's like, how do I make this make sense without being offensive, but also like standing up for myself if needed, or somebody else, and like, do you understand like why this works or why this doesn't work? And I remember uh about a year and a half ago, I was at a promotion, and I was being explained like, okay, we're going to do this thing. This is why we're going to do this thing. This is what's going to happen. Um, you're going to be involved in this match. This wrestler one is going to do this thing to wrestler two, and it's going to leave this like stone cold impression. And I'm like, no, it won't, because the person isn't experienced enough to pull off stone cold. It's going to make them heel. People are going to hate them. Uh, hate them, cheer for the person who's the heel, and then like, yeah, it's just not gonna work. And oh no, that's not what's gonna happen. We got this down. We totally got this down. And no, it didn't work that way. It totally worked exactly how I said it was gonna work. And they didn't understand. And like there were 3 people I remember there who were involved in the booking of that moment, and they were all like, this shouldn't have gone off this way. The crowd reaction was supposed to be totally different. And like, we don't understand and we don't get it. And I'm like, she violently cheated. She attacked a face. Like, this wasn't her being aggressive. This was her like turning heel. And so now she's a heel. Well, we don't need her to be heel. I'm like, well, then you got to figure your way out of it.
Yep. It's tough though, man, because like sometimes what it is, like I said, sometimes you just get too close to the project and you're just like, nah, we got to defend what we got going on. Because I know, like, and it's kind of cool too. And and I was thinking about this while we were talking about stuff. Like I was asking somebody, there was a new kid who's been training, and he was asking me like questions about like how to be a heel, like what good heel tactics are and stuff like that. And fortunately for me, like I in my book, like I have like all sorts of things that like people have taught me or told me and stuff like that. So I was able to give back that knowledge a little bit to him. And the one thing that really stuck out to me, he was just like, "Well, how come?" And this was something that I genuinely I had to stop and think about for a second, and I kind of want to bounce this off of you. So this is live. Um, so he was like, "How come I don't get this stuff from my trainer?" And I was like, "Do you ask?" And he was like, "Well, no." I was like, "Well, and that's why you don't know, and that's why that's why he doesn't know."
Mhm.
I was like, "Your trainer's not a mind reader, man. You gotta go and legitimately ask those questions and to get the answers that you're looking for." And I feel like that's where I'm at now too. Is that like I've had shows, and now I've had experiences with like a bunch of different companies, and so now it's like I'm not afraid of feedback. I'm not afraid of criticism.
Yeah.
It's just I guess really just kind of just asking people. It's almost like in a sales position, you're like asking for the sale.
Hmm.
It's similar. It's like, all right, well, let me get that feedback. What did you think of this? Was how this was going on? And it's tricky though because like I want to ask certain people, but I feel like certain people like credit credit to Sicken. He never sugarcoats anything. He's always gonna tell me what he thinks.
Hmm.
But I'm also kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say it's numbing because like I've just heard him talk to me and give me critiques, good critiques, right? But just give me critiques. So I'm always looking for like somebody new to like give me something that I haven't heard yet, or maybe they have Sicken has said it. I'm just
Hmm.
looking for someone else to say it too. So and it's not I'm not trying to be mean about it, but it's like I feel like even if you were somewhere like at Creative Pro, right, and Brian Myers, Myers was always giving you critiques, right? Eventually, I feel like you would get used to hearing critiques, even though you're interpreting them, you're understanding them. You still need an outside voice to tell you, like, "Hey, man, like you're doing this, try this." And
Yeah.
it, even though he said it, this person said it back, and you're like, "That makes sense."
Hmm. And not that one trainer is not equal to the next trainer. No one school is not equal to the next school, and that's the unfortunate reality of it too. Now, and to be fair as well, who knows if that person was a regular attendee of their own training program too? Because that falls apart. And at the same time, like I've known, I've seen it. No, when I say this, like I have been around a minute, so like I've seen every trick that people like to play when it comes to like getting ready for training. So like the training schools that do like a cardio workshop before they start their training class and getting in the ring. Like I've seen the people who like they know what time that happens and that they don't show up because traffic um, until after the cardio has ended. Or like, oh, this is the day we're gonna go street teaming, and like there's always a reason why they can't do a street teaming. Or this is promo class day. And worse than like any tryout opportunity, I have seen people run from promo class, like because they're so afraid to be in front of people as the lone soul talking and having to address people directly, and they're terrified by that. And it's like this is part of it. You have to work through all of this because it's the whole presentation together. And that's to kind of even go back to the original question. That's some of what I'm looking for. Where are those things coming together? There are some people that I've known in wrestling for a while, and the worst thing I hate to hear is like, tonight's going to be an easy night, because and one person in my brain right now, it's like I know that means like they're just going to do their standard stuff, their 5 moves of doom. They can like do this match in their sleep because they've have this weird formula in their brain. They're not going to put effort behind it, and it's going to show in the ring they're not putting effort behind it. Versus somebody who's younger, who has fire, and it's like, I want to show more, and I want to maybe show off. I want to do better, and I want to improve, and I want to show like this is why I deserve to be here and why I deserve to be booked the next time too, and by this other person too. Like I like watching somebody's potential more than I do sometimes somebody who's fully flushed out, because they take their pedal off the gas a little bit, and it's like, no, like you need to still be moving and like trying and going for it. And then, don't sit there and be like, why am I not getting my next opportunity? Like, because you stop growing. You stop trying to put effort or energy towards it. Why would somebody be interested in that lazy guy? Like, push yourself to always be doing the next thing.
Yeah, it's interesting too because like I was just talking to another friend about that, right? About pushing yourself and doing stuff, and I was like, dude, like I know, like in my repertoire, there's like a whole host of things that are ready to explode out of it, and it's like you get told like, hey, we're gonna stick to like these kind of moves and not these ones, right? And certain times it makes sense, right? So sometimes like you're at a taping, right? And there's nobody in there in there except for the boys, and you're in just like a warehouse. Like
Yeah.
there's no reason to do something crazy like a 450 splash or like a backflip off the middle rope, right? Because you're not really gonna be there. But if you're in front of a crowd, obviously, pedal to the metal, all the accelerator got turned off and you just gotta go.
Mhm.
But it's crazy because like I find myself like wanting to try new stuff, but also it's weird because I was just talking to another person about this as well, that like on the other side of fear is ecstasy, and you just have to take that leap of faith. And like I find myself again, this is where like I'm at now with myself, as like not just growing, but just the fear of like what's on the other side, what's gonna happen.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where it's like I genuinely, now this is like a full conversation that we normally would have anyway. Um I genuinely find myself just stopping and just like, man, like I look at Second and I'm like, hey, what's the next move? What should I be doing? Where should I be going? And he's always like, just go, just try whatever. And I'm like, no.
Right.
But it's tough. It's tough. It's that fear aspect. And again, it goes back to like the whole dating scenario when you went up to that first person and you were like, "Hey, will you be mine?" And then you don't want to put yourself out there because you're afraid like you're gonna get hurt. And after the first one, nah,
Yeah.
it's okay after that.
Well, and I'm the first one to admit too, when as being super young in wrestling, like I went through a training program and I walked out and not knowing for another 6 months, like I don't know what match psychology is. Like I don't know what match structure really is. And I say really because there's intricacies that somebody watching might be able to interpret some things, but like there's more intricacies to it. And I remember like I sat down with a friend and I was like, I know I'm missing something, and I need to hear this. And like I feel like I have this and not this. And so between that, my friend, between going to different seminars and just like keep I kept working on it to be like, how does this structure to make sense? Because it's not making sense right now, and I don't understand why it's not making sense. And until I had like some of those nail holes filled in, like, oh, that's what I should have been doing this entire time. Why didn't this person tell me the correct way that I should have been doing this? And one aspect it was, well, because maybe that person wasn't incredible enough to have been telling you in the first place. And then on the other side of it too, I didn't know what I should have known to ask the question. And so when I realized I didn't know enough, like you have to be brave enough to then be able to ask that question too.
Yeah. I think that's where I'm just at. Like it's weird how I'm like able to go over and talk to another person and be like, "Hey, do you want to come be on my podcast?" And yeah, I can't go back and be like, "Hey, could you like super critically, give me some real criticism and help me grow?"
Yeah.
It's definitely hard. But what's funny is that like I have a few people that like I know if I went back to and I just said, "Hey, like here's some things that I have going on. Like, where do you think I should be at in my time?" It, they'd be more than willing to help out. But I know it's weird too. It's weird to go back and ask those people because it's like some people I haven't talked to in almost 2 years because that's how long this show's been going on. But I'm sure they'll be down to help. I'm not.
Yeah.
I need to go out and just make those connections.
Absolutely. And that's some of it too, is the them seeing you come back and ask it, and them seeing you still involved will mean something too. Um and again, me meeting somebody brand new off the street that I've never met before, that's like, oh, I've been in 2 years and blah. It's like, okay, so now I need to learn you. But for somebody who's like I've seen grow and develop over the last 2 years, it's like I really know that what you should be doing next because I've been seeing you this whole time. And what should you be developing into if I've seen the progression over time? And it's again those people that don't have that progression, that it's like, this is where they were at, this is where they're going, this is where they're at, and then like, why am I not signed yet? Like, because you're still there. Like, you're not, you haven't increased, you haven't gone up, you haven't changed anything, you haven't tried something different. You need to push it in order to get to that next space.
And none of you guys are going to find out how he critiques me when this ends, because I'm going to ask him afterwards.
Well, no.
You know what? Full transparent. I'll put it all out there. I don't even worry about it. Someone's going back and they'll be like, "Oh wow, like look at Phil. He's just destroying this kid."
Yeah.
Like, first of all, I'm 36. Don't kid nothing.
Right.
No, but all right, cool. I mean, I appreciate.
That's why I backed off comparing you to a 20-year-old, because I was like,
I'm old.
You have life lessons experienced, and I was like, I don't know if you've actually ever put your age out there, so let me be cautious.
Oh, I think I have. I think I've on a few different, because I've had people on the podcast that have gone out and said like, "Oh, well, you know, like I've been in the business for like 7 years." I'm like, "Cool. How old are you?" And they're like, "Oh, I just turned 24." I'm like, "Bet." Well, I'm 36.
Yeah.
Old.
Like I remember being because I was I had been working in the back before I got trained. So by the time I got trained, like I was of legal drinking age, and so like same kind of experience. Like, oh yeah, I've been people my age, like I've been working for 7 years, and I'm like, did you start in like high school? Yeah, I totally did. And I'm like, oh, I feel out of this game already. Like,
oh man, when I talked to, I forget, one of the kids that was like training. It was like the second week I started training, and they're like, "Yeah, oh, I can't wait till next week, man. I turned 21." I was like, "Bruh, I was in Iraq when I was 21." I was like, "Oh no, we on two
Right.
different wavelengths."
Now the Oh No song is playing from TikTok.
Oh yeah, it definitely. I was like, "Oh man, bro, you have no idea how hard the world's gonna hit you, but you'll
Yeah.
get there."
Right. I mean, God love them, but like I have friends who've done tours of Japan, and it's like, wow, that's a pinnacle. That's like a dream that some people would ever have, and then they're living couch to couch from different friends because like their focus has only been this and not to a level where they can move past that. And so it's like there's a reality to what the energy you put in and what you expect to get out of it.
Right, there really is. There really is. So we're gonna transfer this over, man, and we're
Okay.
gonna talk. We're gonna put it out there. It's a game. Some of our people, our long-term viewers and listeners, know it's called Pin, Submit, and DQ. We're gonna play 3 rounds. Pretty much, if you guys know the game, you know what do they call it? Kill, Mary, Fuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like that. Is what we're gonna do. We're doing 3 rounds though, and I just thought we'd start this off. I don't know, with some dudes. Some people call them goons. But we're gonna put out there Killian, Miles Millennium, and AK Willis.
So like just to be clear, because like I want to understand, like when you say like, am I pinning this person?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Okay.
You're totally going over. But
Okay.
You have to pick like between.
But except for the DQ, like am I like I'm being DQ'd or like?
No, you're totally taking them out. Yeah, don't worry about that part. DQ. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I've never met AK Willis. So I'm gonna pin AK. Because that seems straightforward. Get it done. I just want to tap out Miles Millennium. Like that little squirt deserves it. And then Killian just needs a chair to the head a couple of times, and it'll be fine. So DQ'd Killian.
Nice. So we'll take it over. And we'll bring it into, I don't know, Riot City. So we'll talk about it because I love throwing their names out there. So we'll go with it.
Okay.
Sicken, Jason Drake, and Ron Holiday.
Ooh. Ron also needs a good chair to the head. So DQ Ron. Pin Jason. I have enough respect for Jason to pin him cleanly. Sickened always teases the fact, and when he was younger in wrestling, and like we were all working out in a ring, that I would work with him on chaining, and he is not the technical wonder, and he hated that because he's like, this is not my bag, bro. Like, why are you working on this? And one, it was because it was like, well, then let me help you with it. And then two, because I was seeing some of his elders, just because he was the smaller guy sometimes, like, I'm just gonna beat you up, and like, no, like, teach him, like, help him, like, let him develop and learn more. And so, like, I would take him, and I never told him that. I would just be working with him. And then he said he recognized, like, one day, because somebody was like, he had this emotional reaction to somebody else going like, oh, this person's just gonna punch me in the face. and he saw me, like, sort of grab him and drag him away, and he's like, I just see what Phil did right there. So for that, I have to submit Sicken.
Bad. I like it. Well, then let's take this. You know what? We're gonna do a unique one for this one. We're gonna do tag teams. We're gonna
Okay.
do tag teams for this one. So we're gonna throw out Pure Ignorance, Dog Nation, and then of course, Black Privilege.
Ooh. Oh, this is hard. I like all you guys. I mean, with a name like Pure Ignorance, like, you just got to put them in the place. Like, you got to submit them. You just have to, just because of the name. Dog
There you go,
Nation,
Chaz.
like, Black Privilege would be a privilege to work, so it'd be a straight up match, and it would be a pin. I think Dog Nation would be a fight, so there would be a DQ involved.
Well, there you have it. There's your 3 rounds of pin, submit, DQ. We should probably, like, get a graphic or something that just, like, comes across.
Boom. Like 3, like, the Kaboom Pal Batman 66 stars, like,
Yes.
pin, submit, DQ.
Tap. I like it. But yeah, all right, man. Well, just let our listeners and our viewers know where they can find you once again.
So I've just relaunched my indie wrestling party, which is an opportunity for me to showcase different talent, different indie companies around the world, but of course primarily focused here in the United States. You can find that every Wednesday at 10 p.m. on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/TrustInPhil. All my social media accounts now are at TrustInPhil, so find me there. I'm not sure when you're airing this, to be very honest. So if this is before the weekend of the 15th, you'll see me at Ignite Wrestling in Vero Beach, Florida, and then Sunday the 16th at Wrestling Revolver in Clive, Iowa. So that's right. I'm going to Florida and Iowa on the same weekend in the middle of winter. Like, why couldn't I stay in Florida longer? My booking agent needs a talking to. And then I have a lot of things coming up with, like, MCW Pro Wrestling. It's kind of funny. You might have seen me distracted a couple times because people are shooting me other messages, and I'm like, I guess I got to respond to this. Just about other dates and things. So MCW has multiple events that are going to be taking place over the next 2 months in a variety of different locations around the state of Maryland. Check them out, mcwprowrestling.com. IWA East Coast is out to open up a new school location down in Charleston, West Virginia, and I'm involved with them. Wrestle Pit in Pittsburgh, which is ran by Lady Frost, who just made her Impact debut, or televised or pay-per-view Impact debut. And Savage Gentlemen run that company. Wrestle Pit has been awesome to work with. Just after they've only had one event so far, they're returning with their second event in February, and I'm really looking forward to it because I just see, like what I said about talent having this potential and, like, seeing this potential grow. Like, I look at Wrestle Pit and I'm like, something special is going to happen here, and it just needs that that it needs growth and it needs that push and it needs that development, and it's going to become this really cultured thing. And I'm really looking and very excited for it.
Bet. Actually, I'm super excited about Wrestle Pit too. So, you know, I could put my name out there on our podcast. Book me. Anyway, so
Maybe you should bring like Savage Gentleman and Lady Frost on the podcast and just have a conversation. And
you know what? Maybe I will. Maybe I will. You know what? We'll talk more about this after the podcast, because we're gonna take this home, because this is the 3 Count Podcast presents Now Entering the Ring 201, and you know that's what I said. I'm your host, Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you up this mountain called wrestling. That's right. You can call me your Sherpa, but it's never about me. It's about who's entering the ring, because you gotta have someone who's been there, done that, and can do it better than you can, and that's why I trust in Phil. That way. That's how you point. So trust in Phil, because he's the man with the plan and the guy that can get you anywhere you can. So you guys know what to do. Tune into the next episode and be there, or you just wait for this episode to end. You wait for that outro, and then you choose another episode. Peace. What's going on, 3 Count Nation? I'm Clifford Red Dog Miller with the catchphrase. But what I really want you to do right now, go to twitter.com, right? Go over there, find us at the 3count_pod, give us a follow, give us a like, give us a comment. We want to talk to you guys. Go to IG at the 3 Count Pod. Give us a like, give us a follow, leave us a comment. We want to interact with you. Go to youtube.com, give subscribe, turn the bell on, turn the notifications, leave a comment. We want to talk to you. Go to anchor.fm/the 3 Count Podcast, and in there, you can leave us a message, and we will talk to you. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that we want to talk to you. We want to have fun with you guys, and we love listening to what you guys have to say. Also, one thing I need you to do for me, the 3 Count Podcast also has merchandise. Oh! At ProWrestlingTees.com/the 3 Count Pod. Please go buy our t-shirts. We love you guys, and we hope you love us too. So show us some support, please.